Yeah. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Finance United podcast. I am your host, Lenny Bradley. And this episode, we're going to do something a little different. Now, in law enforcement, a lot of people, they focused on the job as their primary source of income, and there's nothing wrong with that. The whole thing is that sometimes we get into a financial bind and we try to find side hustles in different ways to allow us to live a very comfortable life. And the typical things that we do to make sure that we secure our future is we pad our pension, we get into different types of investments. The biggest thing right now, crypto, stocks, things of that sort. But I kind of wanted to bring a different element to this episode. And let's talk about how I got in touch with our guest here today. Last year, while COVID was going on, I found myself having a little bit extra time. And I came across a show on Netflix by the name of Fastest Car. And I saw today's guest on the show. His name is Pejman Gadimi, AKA PJ. And I was really, I don't want to tell everybody what it is that happened, but I was really impressed by the way that he carried himself and the way he spoke about entrepreneurship and just kind of change your mindset to know that everything is in your power and everything is in your control as far as creating success and creating wealth. Not only that, but with me having a little bit of downtime, I was speaking to a friend of mine that has a Lamborghini, and I was talking to him and I said, listen, Dave, how do you afford this thing? Like, how have you made this happen? And he said, listen, there's different strategies out there where you could actually purchase cars and make money from them. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. Like, I don't see how that's possible. And he said, no, it is. And I was like, all right, I would like to find out a little bit more about that. And then he goes and he tells me that not only can you make money with cars, but you can also make money with watches. So I'm like, all right, I've never heard of anything like this. So let me dig in a little more. I started to do searches, and the first thing that came up was exotic car hacks. I looked for the watches, and then from there, I came across the Watch Trading Academy, and I've been hooked since. So I would like to welcome today's guest once again, PJ, also known as Pejman Gadimi. Thank you for coming on the show today, PJ.
I appreciate you having me on, buddy.
All right. Well, PJ, would you mind getting into your history a little bit? How you got into watches, how you got into investing, entrepreneurship?
Well, so a very quick background, so we don't spend too much time on that. I think people are more interested about learning how to get side hustles, right? From what I heard.
Right.
But my background is I started working very young, came into the country very young, and with a single mother, not a lot of money to our name, and just ended up living in my uncle's basement during the first, I would say, 5-6 years of my life here in America, which started working at 14 as a telemarketer. By 18, I had quite a lot of experience in sales, marketing, and also management. So I figured out a way to become the youngest bank manager out there in the US, and then followed through and became a VP for a bank as well by 23. And then by 25, found myself kind of without employment as a result of this was my first real career. Didn't really know what I was doing in the sense of politics at work, and so things kind of changed and took a very interesting turn for me. But I started my first company after that, which was VIP Motoring, which was an investment fund using my finance background to basically allow people to invest in cars, watches, and art. I established that back then, and it started small like everything else. And through the years, kind of evolved to becoming this very large fund that manages $500 million in investments into those assets. So I learned all the algorithms that make these things go up, go down, side to side, and what goes up, what goes down, what works, what doesn't. And through the years, I kind of figured that we had this big investment fund. The minimum in was $5 million. It was very limiting to who could participate, right? So it wasn't, not everybody has $5 million in disposable money, not even in investable money, but in disposable money. So I realized that there was a big gap and the world was changing. People were coming into money, and there were a lot of new millionaires who had just $1 million, just a couple $100,000. And I saw that there were people that, still were consumers of these industries, which were watches and cars. They were buying cars and losing money, and they were buying watches and losing money because they were doing what a typical consumer would do. They would walk into a dealership and basically walk out completely like butthurt, not realizing they were butthurt until it was the time to get rid of their car. When they would go trade it in, they were like, oh, it's worth 50% less now.
Yeah.
And they were still consumers. So people, I realized for a long time now, have only looked at cars and watches as normal consumers, not investors and people with millions of dollars, but normal people have always looked at those things as consumable goods. So they've always looked at them as depreciating assets. They've always looked at it as I buy a car, it's worth less, I write it off, I lease it. These sayings that have been out there over the last 10, 15 years haven't evolved with the system and the process. Meaning the auto industry today is very different than what it was years ago, and so is the watch industry. And just there is just things that are happening in the world that people are unaware of. And part of that is not their fault. It's because industries like the automotive and jewelry industry work very hard to keep their trade a secret, because no one wants people to know they're making $20,000, $30,000 off of them when they're selling them a car, right? Nobody wants them to know that.
Right.
So they feel weird about it, So as a result of that, there is this whole misconception about how the entire industry works. And with my fund and having done this for very wealthy people, I realized very clearly that there was a void in that space where the education was there for people who maybe wanted to do this at home with one car, maybe not a fund and millions of dollars, but just one car at a time. Normal people buy nice cars too, right? They buy Mercedes cars, BMWs, they eventually move up to Porsches, Ferraris. There's a progression to life, and I felt, why not start educating the masses on how to make that progression go, one, even faster, and two, not become a liability. Because for years, we've been taught that if you buy luxuries, they're going to depreciate and lose a lot of money. And so I started thinking that maybe it was time that we start teaching people not the art of just making money, because I can teach people how to make money through business. But I said, what about, why do we make money? We make money to buy things, right? Like, why else do you need money? Like,
Exactly.
right? So the point is that the way we look at things is usually the byproduct of what we've been taught all these years. And in this case, I believe that people deserved better. And so I created 2 platforms, one of which is called Exotic Car Hacks, one of which is called Watch Trading Academy, to kind of bring people together and teach them these 2 trades. So I created what we call a wealth preservation strategy, which was what my fund was about, which allowed normal people to enjoy luxuries, not renting them, owning them, but
Right.
buying the correct ones so they don't depreciate and they're not losing money. So imagine driving an incredible Lamborghini like you are going to buy anyways, except buying it the correct way at a certain price point with the correct methodology, the correct financing, to ensure that by the time you're done, because most people get bored in a year or they want something else or priorities change, you didn't lose money. You enjoyed the Lamborghini for a year. And if you were responsible, you didn't act like a fool and do stupid things with it.
Right.
Then you end up being able to walk away and say, hey, it was a great experience. I enjoyed this car and I didn't lose any money. Now
Right.
imagine wearing a Rolex, and instead of thinking of it as, oh, I paid so much money for this and, I'm just going to wear this, I don't know if I can afford it. What if you could park your money in a Rolex for a couple of months, wear it, and then turn around and get rid of it and even make 20, 30%? Wouldn't that be the same as putting your money in a stock, but more fun because you get to enjoy it and you watch it on your wrist and you're like, this is so great, right?
Absolutely. And I think the common misconception, like you said, is everybody, they want to purchase these things, but they think that they're going to lose cash on them. The whole thing is, when it comes down to this process, when it comes down to investing, a lot of it has to do with investing with your thought process first. So how do you get a person to change that train of thought to think, all right, I'm going to take risk. I'm going to do things differently from how my parents have done it and everybody else that's surrounding me?
Well, I like to think about, so people are very kind of univision towards things like this because it's an industry they don't understand. That's why I took the approach of education rather than servicing people. Meaning, I could have said, let me buy you a car. I could have said, let me show you how to buy watches and I'll buy you a watch. But instead I said, let me teach you how to buy yourself a watch. Let me teach you how to buy yourself a car. Because I'm a believer that the education is the key to the change in perspective, right? Like the more information you have, the more knowledgeable you become, the less scared of something you become. So I always give this example about how people change is, let's say you're a mechanic, right? You're a good mechanic, you're working, you cut yourself on the car and your arm gets infected, right?
Yep.
So you panic because you're not a doctor. You go, oh my God, my arm looks horrible. Maybe it's getting into my bloodstream, I might die. So you rush to the emergency room and the doctor's like, no, that's how your skin reacts, it's normal. So here's some soap and this, and you're like ready to go. Here's some stitches and you're good to go. So now you're like, oh wow, I panicked. I thought I was going to die here. I was even willing to pay 3 times more to see a doctor today because I didn't want to lose my arm, right? Over a cut. Now, what happens if it happens again? Well, you're not going to be as panicked because you already saw the reaction the first time, right? Right. So the second time, you're not going to spend $300 to go to the emergency room in 1 minute. You're going to be like, whoa, this can wait. I got more important things to do. I'll just put some water and soap on it. I'll get to it tomorrow or next day, right? So your mind changes in the way it perceives information once it receives new information. Now, in addition to that, there's also this element that if you are the doctor and your car breaks down, then you have the same panic mode. You get a check engine light and you rush to that mechanic and you go, whoa, what's happening? I don't want my car to blow up. Yeah. And the mechanic goes, no, there was just a sensor. You could even drive on it the whole life and nothing would happen. And he's like, oh, okay. So next time your light comes on, you're also not as worried, right? The point is we tend to become very knowledgeable in the fields we're interested in. And we tend as human beings to not attend to the fields we're not interested in until we become interested in them. So this is where the trap kicks in, meaning until we're ready to buy a Lambo, we typically don't educate ourselves on Lamborghinis. We go, well, who cares, right? It's like, unless you're ready to buy a Lamborghini today, you're like, why is this podcast even relevant to me? Right. What are you telling me here? Why do I even care? Why is this important, right? Versus same thing with watches. If someone's listening to this and they go, well, wait a minute, like I'm not in a position to buy a $20,000 Rolex. So why am I listening to this? Let me switch the channel and go hear something else, right? Yeah. What happens in our minds is we typically don't focus on pre-education. We focus on what I call immediate, instant gratification education, which is, oh, I need this tomorrow. So all night long, I'm basically going to become an expert in 30 minutes by Googling everything I can. So the issue with instant gratification is that we don't actually have the ability to validate the information we learn. So in other words, when we become experts in 30 minutes the night before buying a Lamborghini, we're only experts based on the information we consumed over the last 30 minutes, which is very dangerous. It's like imagine if you did your investigation in a case. I'm sure people listening to this are police officers and other individuals who are in law enforcement. Imagine if you made your entire investigation over 30 minutes and you were basically like, well, based on what I Googled of this investigation, this guy's guilty and it's probable that this guy's guilty too. And you're like, I'm just going to take everybody to jail and there you go, solved. And I'm going back to having a pizza, right? So it doesn't work that way. It comes from your ability to investigate every fact you receive, to make sure it is fact or is it a lie, and to go back and forth. Right. And so that's why I'm a big believer that the most successful people on earth are not the people who become experts overnight, but rather people who over time are not only educating themselves, but then giving themselves time to validate the patterns they see or not. In stock trading, we say that if you're going to make money in stocks, don't trade stocks tomorrow morning. Even if opportunities, trade fake stocks by just doing a spreadsheet for a couple of weeks or a month and see if you can identify patterns. Because the idea, even in stock trading, is not to make money, but it's to become a stock trader. And this is the difference between someone who makes money in something in the long term or who gets lucky making money. There's the guy who understands how stocks work. And there's the guy who says, hey, PJ, give me a tip. What stock should I buy now? Like, I want to make money now. So that guy makes money, maybe he gets lucky, and the next time he loses all his money and goes, stock trading is a scam.
Exactly.
Right? That's how it works. That's how our minds work.
Right.
We're not able to kind of focus on a trade because as people, we're not interested necessarily in the trades that make us money. We're interested in making money. And that's the problem and the reason why most people don't make any money, because they're so focused on making money and not so focused on becoming good at the trade and the person that actually makes people money.
You know what? I want to bring up a good point. I love the fact that Watch Trading Academy is named Watch Trading Academy. And with law enforcement, you here in New York City, you have a 6-month academy. Mm-hmm. it teaches you all the basics and foundations as far as what you need for when you go out there and have to do your job. Now, granted, you're sitting down, you're not out there, you're not getting the experience, but you're learning. You're learning.
Mhm.
But you don't really understand everything until you get out there and you practice it.
Correct. But you also can't get out there and practice it before you graduate the academy.
That's right.
And so this is where a lot of people kind of misunderstand. Like there's the guy that goes to medical school 20 years and then comes out and goes, well, I have 20 years of practice in medical school. Now I'm going to practice in real life. And there's a guy that starts medical school and then uses Google to basically become a doctor in between, just because it sounds cool to his friends.
Right.
So these are two different mindsets. And I think for the idea of finding success in the real world, in the long term, I think it's correct to be educated about the things you're doing rather than allow your buddy who is a tip on how to do it. And you can use this for all financials, even in the police fund or the police like long-term retirement plans. You can either be like, hey, let me talk to my friends here on the force. What are you guys doing? Oh, this is what we're doing. Okay, well, why is that relevant to you?
Yeah.
Why don't you take about 5 to 10 days and break down what you're looking at, listening to, and hearing, and actually break down the information that exists there. You can read the fine print, do some research, and then decide if something is right for you or not.
Right.
So many people blindly follow others just because of a suggestion without actually paying attention to information. And this is where information gets lost in translation. And people go, oh, we're in an information revolution. No, we're in a stupidity revolution of people that basically refuse to do work because it's not of their interest.
Right.
Like you might be like a cop and be like, hey, I love going out there, helping people, doing these things and being active. I don't like sitting behind a desk. But listen, to be an incredible person, regardless of what profession you choose, you have to be well-versed and balanced, right? The most educated, the most successful people on earth, regardless of the trade they carry, are going to do that. I have a friend who's a really successful law enforcement. He works for a sheriff's office, and he is also a mortgage broker. And one does not prevent him from doing the other. He's successful in both ends.
Right.
And he's become a financial expert in his field because he loves it. And he still loves his work with the force too. So like he has both elements that he's doing, and he's doing it very well. And he's the perfect proof that just because he chose a profession that maybe didn't pay that well to begin with, compared to what we consider well as in making millions of dollars, he's still driving an Audi R8 around, he's still wearing a $20,000 Rolex.
Right.
And he's still, on other days, he's wearing a SWAT outfit and he's going out there and breaking doors,
That's great. That's great. So let me ask you this, PJ. How do you think investing in cars and investing in watches compared to something as common as stocks or now crypto?
So I'm not a believer in crypto. Now, and I'll share my thoughts. Now, it doesn't mean that people should not invest in crypto. I'm not a financial advisor when it comes to crypto. Yeah. I'll tell you why I don't believe in it. Doesn't mean that it doesn't make money. So this is the part that people have to understand. Just because someone has an opinion of something not, being for them doesn't mean it's not for you. You just have to kind of understand the facts of why someone looks at it. I have a background in finance, which means I pay attention to analytics and finance. Anytime a financial position is so relevant to so few people, meaning so few people own the majority of the stock, then there is such a high level of manipulation in the stock that things can change overnight. Just like last night, we saw Elon Musk tweet something about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's down like fucking $30,000. You got to think about that. That's not normal in financial markets. So, right. And that's only happening because it's not regulated. That would be illegal technically, in another sphere, but it isn't. So when something's not regulated, it doesn't mean there isn't money to be made in it. It doesn't mean it can't go up. None of those things. That's fine. That's fair. People have made millions. We're not declining that people can make millions in crypto, can make hundreds, thousands, whatever. The point is, for me personally, I'm not a fan of it because of the unpredictable nature of the investment. And I'm a very analytical person, and I don't make investments on hype. I make investments based on data, and I analyze data and then make a decision if something is right for me or not. So for me, crypto and the lack of data that supports what people see on the internet does not make me excited about investing in it. So even if I could make a couple of $100,000 with just one position, I choose not to, because I choose to be selective in how I invest so that my mind doesn't get buried in trying to keep up with like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? Blah, 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 blah. And I don't want to do that. So the best way to become a very successful financial manager of your own life is to learn to say no to things that don't resonate with you, even if others are making millions in them.
Yes.
Like every day I open my Facebook, everybody's like, I'm making, who's not buying Dogecoin or this? It doesn't bother me.
Right.
And not every opportunity is mine to take.
That's
and
right.
that is the key to long-term financial wealth, is to ensure that you can't be in everything all the time. And you can't just hop boats like Frogger the game and try to find the lot that makes the best route at that moment. You can't do that.
Right.
So the other part, to answer your question, stocks are very real things, but the difference between a stock and an investment like a car or watch is that those are more closely related to real estate, because there's a tangible good involved that you can hold into your hands. When you buy a home, even though it is an investment in one way, it is also the fact that the home is lived in, right? It can be lived in and enjoyed, and then you can get rid of it and get your money back. And maybe you made a good investment and made money because it was in a good neighborhood and so on and so forth, you know? But it's also a long-term investment with very low liquidity, meaning if you want to get some money, it's hard to just be like, I want to sell my house tomorrow. Boom, I got a check for $1 million. We're done. Doesn't work that way, right? Like, meaning there's a process. Usually the window is 30 to 45 days if you're lucky in a good market. And in many cases, negotiations, broker fees, blah, 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 blah. It's expensive. Cars also have similar liquidity issues where cars don't sell overnight unless it's a hot market like we're in now. And in many cases, cars have titles, taxes, you know, and things that involve that unless you're a dealer, you're going to have a problem with. So the way I look at the real estate and the car market is not as wealth creation, and I don't call them investment. Okay. I call them wealth preservation. It's an incredible way to park money so that your wealth does not get hurt, and allows you to use an item such as a car or a home in an enjoyable fashion and get a return higher than inflation. So if you're earning, let's say 6% a year by the time you're out, and inflation was only 3% a year, then you're like, great, I did better than market. And basically I still lived there for free, right? I did better than market and I still drove a Lamborghini for free. I mean, most people work 20 years to own a Lamborghini. My guys basically drive them like toys and get rid of them and ultimately look at it and go, yeah, cool way to park $300K in a savings account, right? Or, you know, get a loan on it and go, cool way to put $2,000 a month towards this IRA basically. And it grows and then I get it out. That's the way you look at it. It's parking money. I call that the wealth transfer method of parking your money into something. In your savings account, you can log into online banking and see it. In a car, you can get into your garage, look at it. Now, like everything else, there are risks. You can buy the wrong car, you can lose. You can also purchase like a car that is damaged because you're not paying attention to instruction in my course and you're buying something that's a liability. You can buy too early. Yeah, there's a process to this. So I don't want to make people on this podcast believe that any Lamborghini you buy is of value or at any price. That's not how this works. There's a real process and strategy to this that must be applied correctly. So that's my disclaimer, so people don't fall victim to the whole, he just said go buy a Lamborghini, it makes sense, and then they lose 30, 50, 100 grand, you know? And then for watches, that's a very different model. Watches are wealth creation for two key reasons. One, people don't realize about not all watches. So if a watch is sold in your local mall, it's most likely not a watch we're talking about here, unless it's a Rolex. Anything else sold at your local mall does not qualify for what we're talking about here. So these are real timepieces and watches that have basically become an instrument for global currency that people don't realize. So a watch is usually made out of gold, right? Some level of precious metal. And that precious metal is also tangible like a car, meaning you can hold on to it and use it. But the benefit is that just like a brick of gold, it has a value that is global. That value is not just in the United States, meaning if gold here, for example, is worth $1,200 an ounce, I can just give you an example. This may not be accurate as of today. Sure. And gold in for example, London is worth 1,100 pounds, you know, and at the time, maybe the pound and the dollar are very similar and they're kind of competing. Now, let's say something happens in London, and now the pound goes significantly up, right? Let's say the pound goes significantly up, and you basically get to a place where now the pound is, let's say, $1,400, per pound. So like you have this disparity, right? First it was 1-to-1, now it's 1.4-to-1. Well, what happens is the price of gold in America now goes up to offset that. Get it? Because it's a global currency.
Right.
And watches hold that same weight across the board.
Wow.
So in other words, watches are also globally adjustable. Now, since there's global inflation all the time, meaning there are different countries going through different economic stages, things get cheaper in one place, higher in another, the currency itself changes the worth of the watch. However, the markets adjust the watch to always retain the same value. So you might see a watch in America because of the printing of money currently, and we've been seeing this. There's watches that I bought for $80,000 a year ago that are now worth $350,000.
Oh.
So if you think about that, you might say, well, wait a minute, why is that? Like, what happened to that watch? Is it discontinued? No, it's hard to get. But now that these currency markets are changing, the price of that watch is going up. So this is why it's important to understand why watch investments in the correct watches are safe, because they are basically recession proof, and they're also they counter currency deflation. So that's why they're such a good asset, and that's why right now the watch market is on fire for two key reasons. Because one, there's assets that people don't have anything else to invest in. They don't trust in banks. They don't trust in stocks. They don't trust in crypto. There's a lot of volatility to go, where do I park my money? If it sits in the bank, they're losing money. If they sit into a watch, they could beat inflation. So they go, I'm going to go in that. Then there's the other side of the coin, which is also the fact that with all the printing of money, the dollar's weakening. You may have noticed around you things become more expensive, right? From labor is more expensive to lumber is more expensive. Everything around you, even milk, is going to start going up. Gas is going up. So like these things are going to change, and watch pricing is going to basically regulate that even further by ensuring there's no loss. Not just the lumbars, we're short on wood, we're going to raise the price, but rather watches are a global currency. And they are really good because typical dealer margins in watches are anywhere from 20 to 40%. And because there are such large margins, that means there's enough money to go around, and there is enough counter dollar into the wholesale to the retail price of something to offset potential short-term economic changes and allow that regulation to basically take its place.
Wow.
I know it sounds complicated, so sorry if I...
No. I mean, listen, that's why it's recorded, right? So we could go back and we could replay it and catch up to you. But so if somebody wants to get into watch investing, what is a good dollar amount for them to start with?
So you can start trading watches with $1,000. We teach this at the Watch Trading Academy. You know this. I mean, you can start with $1,000. You can get into the trade.
Yeah.
You have to learn to trade watches before you invest in watches. Investment watches are basically the next level from trading. So you basically go through the system, you learn the process. And if you're really going to be an investor in the watch game, which means you buy, you hold, and basically you're guaranteed to make something based on the correct watch at the correct time, then you're going to need at least $10,000 to $20,000, I think, to be a good investor in the game. But you can start trading $1,000 watches and start making 20% margins. Now, this is a big deal because there's very few industries that give you 20% on 1,000. Right. And the best part about watch trading is at first it might take you a month to sell a watch or 2 months. But as you get good at this, I average out anywhere from 4 to maybe at the most 12 hours to sell a watch. So if you think about that, if you could multiply your money at a rate of 20% every 12 hours, imagine how quickly you'd get rich, right?
Yeah.
Now the lie here would be for me to tell you that anybody can do this instantly and they would make 20% of their money every 12 hours. That is not true.
Yeah.
I've been doing this 20 years. So for me, I've gotten to a place where that happens. But a really successful watch trader will average out 20% every 5 days. And I've said that even that is extraordinary, if you ask me, because if the cost of capital in the current markets is 10 to 15% a year, imagine doing that in 5 days.
That's amazing.
That's crazy, right? Like, so if you understand that is the trajectory of what's possible, then the question does not become, should you start watch trading today because tomorrow you want to make 20%, but it should be, should you start learning this trade now when you don't believe you have enough time to do it full time, so that you can slowly get into it, so that in 2-3 years from now, you're listening to this conversation going, I'm glad I paid attention then, and I started learning little by little, so that now that I'm kind of in a rut, well, I have this income already coming in with a couple of grand a month in addition to what I'm doing. And listen, like last year, I closed almost $1 million in profits from a side venture. This is the side venture. I don't own a jewelry store. I don't have hundreds of watches being traded a day. It's a combination of trading, investing, understanding markets. I'm just an example of what's possible once you do this really well in 5 to 10 years. Now, I tell people, they go, well, if you did it, can I not do it faster? Well, you're doing it faster because I'm teaching you how to do it. Nobody taught me. I had to learn it. That's why it took me 20 years. You know, a lot of people don't realize that it took me 20 years to do what they can learn to do, so they can technically do it in 5 to 8. You know, we have students now 3 years later that are making 300,000 to 400,000 a year. And I would say that I didn't make 300,000 to 400,000 a year after 3 years. You know, like that was, for me, that wasn't the case at all. It took me like 10 years to get to that, you know, like place where it was like 250, 300K a year. So they're definitely doing it faster than I did, which is commendable. And it's fantastic. I think that's what makes really the opportunity of teaching so great, is to watch other people have so much success so much faster.
Right. Now, a common question I can see a lot of people asking is, why is this not more well known as far as a strategy?
Well, it is known. It's known by people with money. Typically because the majority of people are looking at luxuries as consumers. This is the part I was talking about earlier. The industry, the look at how hard the auto industry and even the government pushes this idea of leasing a car.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, think about that. Like,
if
you can't turn on a TV ad about a car and not see a lease special at the end, right? It's like, hey, this is the new Lexus. But the end of the commercial goes, lease now for $0 down and $300 a month.
All the time.
Right. And exactly. And then the government goes, well, you can write that off on your business. You can lease a car and write it off. So why would anybody encourage bad financial decisions? Well, because this is a global machine, right? And it's a giant machine that functions in this way, where like there's incentives. So manufacturers build more here, more jobs are made here, and so on and so forth. This isn't even the question of you have to go become an expert in micro and macroeconomics of how the world works. What this is and something to pay attention to is the fact that there is a machine and it works a certain way. They don't have an alternative solution to making it work better. So therefore, that's what they're going to preach. The school systems are behind 10 years. We know this. This isn't news. Like trades are like increasing at rates significantly higher. How come school systems aren't changing? How come colleges aren't free yet? Because it's a machine, and as long as the machine's profitable, it keeps running.
Very true.
Right. So when you have machines that run and have been running for 50 years, you're not going to have internal disruption. You only have external disruption. You need other people to come into the mix and be like, whoa, this is completely wrong. Like conventional home buying was a thing until, you know, people like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Kawasaki and people like that came into the game and said, listen, that's not true. You can buy a home a different way. You can make a home an investment. You can get creative. And then the world said, oh, well, there's creative financing. And then the machine said, well, we should therefore offer creative financing. And now banks are like, you don't want money down. You want a lower payment. You want this style, that style, you know, and now they have convention. So people have to utilize that until then models start to say, well, people are doing this. We need to capitalize on it. That's what happens in capitalistic, you know, environment like the United States, is that's how it works. Money is the driver for change, not the other way around, right? So what happens is when the money's being made somewhere, then people go, whoa, like we need in on this. And so this is the argument today with crypto. Is how does the government get involved and make their money into this or tax? So the first thing they do is we're taxing you. Fuck that. You're paying your tax.
Exactly.
You know, there's no more of that black market, so you're going to pay it. Like all it is. And later they'll figure out a way to either make it valuable, or if they can't, they'll basically they'll tell people they can't do it. They'll make it illegal, right? So the problem is that industries have fought very hard to build this machine over the year so that people don't understand the math behind certain things.
Mm.
That's why it's in the fine print, right? That's why the math on your lease is not bright and bold. But what is bright and bold is your car payment.
That's right.
Because we've been conditioned to think you're supposed to have a car payment that equals X amount of your income. You're supposed to have a mortgage that equals X amount of your income. You're supposed to wear a watch only when you can afford cash. You're supposed to do this only. Lamborghini on finance? Are you crazy? It's the worst decision in the world. That's according to every news media outlet.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, who does that? That's stupid. Whatever. It's dumb. Why would you ever do that? It's depreciating and lose money and you're financing it. Dude, you can't afford it. Like, how many times have we heard something as ignorant as that that's based on a truth that may have been true 20 years ago? Right? Like, can we say that a child is prepared to enter the world if he only goes through high school and never actually turns on YouTube, learns anything new, reads a book, and only goes through what their teachers teach him? Is a child going to be equipped to, one, be a worker in the machine or to be a successful entrepreneur within the machine, right? Well, they're going to be a slave to the machine, right?
Right.
So we are conditioning people to basically function in society and survive. We're not conditioning people to try. So, and that is normal and that should be expected. People should be given their own leverage and capacity to own their own success, which they have the option to self-educate for free, join platforms, learn things, but they have to make that a conscious choice to learn. And if they don't want to learn, then they won't. And that's why there's 1% of the wealth. And that's the only reason there's 1% of wealth. I used to live in a basement, and now I average out $4,000 an hour for every day and hour of my existence, even when I do no work. So there is a process and there is a painful suffering process every human must go through to get from I'm a victim to I'm a victor, and I therefore own my success. Doesn't matter what your financial situation is. Even if you're a trust fund baby and you were born into millions, you still have your own demons to fight, right? Like there are different demons to fight for different people.
Yep.
And what I'm saying is too often we're basically categorized in this world based on how we are born rather than who we've become. So I usually tell people there is no such issue with who you are based on what cards you were dealt. There's only the acceptance of the cards in your hand and how you can turn them to better cards. So if you can choose that in life, then regardless that you trade watches, cars, stocks, crypto, then you will find a way to understand that all of life and everything that happens to you is your fault, and you're the one that can change it.
Listen, what you just said is really great. And I think it really applies to my job because there's a lot of police officers that are not happy where they are right now. You see everything that's happened within the last year. Everybody feels very disgruntled. And I'm not going to say everybody, but it's definitely a tough time for everybody that's in law enforcement right now. So there are people looking for different ways to possibly get out or to find hobbies that might generate more income for them to transition to another place. But one thing I did want to ask you is you talked about Robert Kiyosaki, and he kind of brought a different element to owning a house, learning how to make money from it and thinking about it as an investment as opposed to just living in it. Now, I'm sure he caught a lot of flack from people that were higher up that were making money doing the same strategies. How about yourself with watch trading? Now, you said that is for, the high class people that are high earners and things of that sort. And now you're bringing this element of trading and investing in it as a platform. Have you received any pushback or anything like that?
So I'm not gotten any pushback from any individual who is like someone of value who's doing this. The people that hate me the most in the industry are auto dealers and actual jewelers and watch traders that were currently doing this, because what we're doing providing this education is basically unveiling the industry, right? And if I'm teaching you how much margin exists in a car, well, are you going to walk in a dealership and let him make $30,000 off of you? Of course not. No. So that guy is going to be pretty unhappy that this education is out there and so on and so forth, and that this market's coming up. But so is the reality of information, meaning information exists. and it's going to spread anyways. So the fact that I've compiled it into cliff notes for people and have made it easy for them to join and do this, it does not necessarily mean that I have single-handedly disrupted the entire industry. I've just sped up that process. Information in the internet disrupted that industry. I mean, remember, there was a time where a dealership had to be in your home or in your hood, like in your area, right? For you to drive there and be like, I'm looking at cars today with my family, and that's where I buy a car.
Right.
You didn't think you could buy a car from California and have it shipped to New York? Like, this isn't like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I buy a car from there? I can go here. Like, and so you only were limited to what was next to you. Well, partially because you didn't have the internet to go online and see what inventory exists at that dealer in California. So if a Lamborghini didn't exist at the dealer next to you, or Lexus wasn't there, or BMW wasn't there, in your world, that didn't exist. Think about what Instagram did for the world too. I mean, look, when I was a kid and I wanted to be successful, I didn't have Instagram. So I looked at it and I was like, okay, I see this dude walking into the supermarket with this Rolex and this Ferrari. I'm going to go ask him, what do you do for a living, dude? Or I saw my neighbor, he has a bigger home than me. I'm going to go talk to him and be like, what do you do, dude? Like, how come you have this big ass house and I have this tiny ass shack in the corner? like these are the things that before we had to do. We had to have the balls to step up and seek our success. Now we are fed the illusion of success every day on Instagram, Facebook, and everything else through fake narration, fake lives, fake happiness, fake success all day, all over social media. And listen, now it's not that it's not real. There are success stories that are real out there, and they are really good success stories. The problem is we're not willing to investigate which ones are real or not. So when we fall victim to the wrong one, we typically go, they're all fake. And this is the mentality we need to kind of get out of, is to generalize the world. I'm sure in the force, you guys have seen all the news and the terrible things going on with certain individuals and how they treat, what I would call their customers, right? The general population, the people they're there to serve. That doesn't mean every cop is a bad cop. It doesn't mean that every single cop that's white hates every black person. Like, these are the stupidities that people choose to accept, And I'm sure they enrage the good versions of you guys that are out there that are doing your thing and that are like, why are these jackasses, like making it harder for us to do our job? It's hard enough, right?
Absolutely.
And what happens is it's basically the same ideology that just one thing doesn't work for all and not everything is relevant to all, right? And so I think it's so important that if people are listening to this and they're going to look for a side hustle or anything, don't just jump in a side hustle because your brother, your cousin, or your friend told you this is good because it worked for them. Right. Try to identify for yourself, why will it work for you? And then ask yourself, are you willing to commit the next 5 years of your life to learn it? And if the answer is no, because you have no interest in it, or you don't like it, or don't want to do it, most likely you're going to give up in the next 12 months anyways. So why start it and waste your energy, time, and effort? You're better off spending time with your family. I know it sounds like cliche, but I'm like, just don't even waste your time doing it because you're not going to get anywhere.
It's true.
Like only start things you're willing to finish. Only commit to things you're willing to taste, and then make a taste into a reality and make that reality your day-to-day reality. I use this very simple example for people that may help you. You might eat in an Outback Steakhouse or some very generic steakhouse and might feel like this is good steak. The only reason you feel that way is because you haven't tried $200 steak. And the only reason then you have $200 steak and you think it's good is because you haven't tried $1,000 Wagyu. So the point is, the more you try things and the more you get a taste of what life has to offer, the more you'll aspire to do great things, and the less you'll stay focused on the very minimal idea that you are supposed to be humbled and satisfied with generic average experiences in your life. And somehow, because your friends think that you're greedy or want more or are pushing for more, then that just should be something that you consider because you don't want to offend them. You don't live for others, you live for yourself. Your friends aren't going to come bail you out of your next $20,000 problem. Your friends aren't going to come pay your mortgage. And more importantly, your friends aren't going to be your friends when you're worth $10 million and they're still working a 100K job. That's just the reality of how the world works.
Right.
And that it has nothing to do with good or bad or right and wrong. It has everything to do with the experience of life you wish to undertake. And what are some of the things you're willing to do to see that experience come to life for yourself, for your family, for those you truly care about.
Right. So for those people that aren't surrounded by people that can be influential or doing things that might help propel them into a realm in which they may want to be, how would you say that they should get started? Do you think that they should get started with getting educated on what it is and where it is that they want to be so that they could start to be surrounded around those people to kind of bring them?
100%. I mean, listen, you have to be knowledgeable about what you want. One of the dumbest things people do is they come to me and they're like, mentor me, show me the way. I'm like, show you what way? They're like, show me the way. I'm like, the way to what? And they can't define it. That's the problem. The problem is they don't know what path they want to be on. They're like, tell me what to do so I get rich. That's not how this works.
Right.
That's not how this works. If you're not willing to understand what you want to do to get rich, then how do you expect people to help you along the way? If you haven't done your base homework, why do you think someone can help you? Like, people come to me and they're like, hey, you're the watch and car guy, teach me. I'm like, teach you what? They're like, the watch and car thing. I'm like, what is the watch and car thing? Well, I don't know. That's what I want you to teach me. Okay, well, I have a ton of courses. I have a ton of books. Did you read them? Did you go through it? Oh, no, I just want you to teach me. I'll learn one-on-one. I'm like, that's great. That's fantastic. But the world doesn't revolve around what you like, how you like it. And, you know, it's not like you're going to go have $1,000 Wagyu steak and you're like, that's what I like to do and I don't want to pay for it.
Right.
I don't want to earn my seat at the table and I don't want to pay for it. You're going to have to go through your own struggles and your own suffering, and you're going to have to earn your seat to one day be invited. And even if you're not, even if you have to watch from afar because you're not a person of value today, then pay attention to how others do it. You know, in my life, I never had a single mentor in my life that came to me and said, step by step, BJ, here's what you got to do.
Right.
What I did have I was surrounded by incredible people that didn't even know I existed. This is the part that's different about me and other people, is my mentors didn't know I exist. And the power of it was that these people didn't need to do a single thing for me. They just needed to be great at what they did. And they were kind enough to do it in a public manner where I could watch them do it. And by watching them and paying attention and kind of following the trails they left behind of how something got done, I put in the work to investigate and learn how things were done. I mean, earlier today, we are having a video conference for watch trading, like we have a yearly conference.
Yeah.
And I was interviewing one of our guest speakers, and he's the person that inspired me to get into the watch trading game. And he had never met me till about like 2 months ago. And yet I had aspired to kind of follow his footsteps back in the 2000 era, you know, very early.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I exist until like 2 months before that. Someone told him, hey, they're talking about you in that watch community. And he was like, really? You know, and then he's like, oh man, I remember when you were a kid posting cars and we were talking in that forum. I was like, yeah. And he's like, it's amazing. Like, what you've built surpassed anything I've ever done. And I'm like, yeah. But the point is, the mentorship wasn't about him coming and saying, PJ, here's what you need to do to be successful. It was just me paying attention to how he posted a watch for sale, how he behaved when I tried to buy a watch from him. Like, these were the things that like encouraged me to understand, if the best acts this way, then the question wasn't, how can I act exactly the same, but rather, why do they? What do they know that I don't know? What are they doing that I don't understand? So if the wealthiest and most successful people you see around you are buying new Lamborghinis every 6 months, instead of saying, well, they're only doing it because they're rich and none of us can afford to do that, start asking yourself, why are they buying Lamborghinis every 6 months? Why do they think that's a good idea? I mean, listen, you're looking at these people saying, you have the money I wish I had. You're doing the things I wish I could do. And they're doing it. So now, instead of worrying about, oh, well, they just have enough to lose it, don't think in your mindset and put your horrible mindset in their shoes. Instead, think the other way around and start asking yourself, what do you know that I don't know?
That's right.
You know, like, what you got here, I want to get there, but now you're doing something that doesn't make sense to me. You're buying cars, and to me, cars are depreciating assets. That's what you think in your head when you're not rich, right? You go, that's what I'm taught, and that's what I've learned, that's what I'm accepting. Right. So then you stop for a second and you go, wait a minute. Why are you doing that, dude? Like, if I do some real estate investing, not a lot, and I watch one of the guys that I have respect for in real estate start buying real estate in Utah, I go, what the hell is in Utah? Like, why is he doing
what's
that?
going on over there? Yeah.
So the first thing doesn't come to mind as he's lost his shit. He's going the wrong way. He's making a mistake. He's wrong. I know better now that I've been in this business. 3 years, he's done it for 30, but I got it because I got on Google last week. Like, you understand the stupid mentality? Like, instead, you need to be like, what are you doing? And if you can't figure it out, I'm going to pay that guy even $500 to $1,000 for an hour of his time. And I'm going to be like, listen, do you mind getting on a phone call with me for an hour? Just so I can kind of understand, like, what do you see in Utah that I don't see?
Right.
And the more he shares with me about it, the less interested I am about it. The more secretive he's about it, the more I'm going to go ape shit and Google everything I need to do and find everything I need to know about Utah to know why he's trying to keep all the gold to himself. Get it?
That's right. That's right.
And I'm not going to take it against them or be like, this guy's an asshole, he doesn't want to share. Even if I paid him, it's going to validate for myself what extra work I need to put into the game to be able to get myself up there again.
That's very true. And I'm going to use myself as an example. If it wasn't for me being interested in watches and taking that leap in joining your courses, I wouldn't have you on this podcast right now. So sometimes if you're interested in something, like you said, you just have to jump in. You have to be willing to pay for it and can't see learning as an expense, but as an investment. Now,
right, 100%.
Yeah. So one thing I know a lot of people are going to want to know is how much time should they devote, or how much time do you see people commonly devoting to trading daily?
At the beginning, you have to do it a lot. In the long term, not so much. That's where it's a little bit difficult. Like, it's hard for people to swallow that at first you have to put in the work to learn the markets and everything. Today, for me, it takes one text to make $5,000.
Wow.
One text message, one watch sold, boom, $5,000. When I started, maybe 2 hours of research a day, 1 hour of posting things, talking, still 3 hours a day. And I made maybe $2,000 to $3,000 every 2-3 months. Okay. We have studies for some of our members making, $700 into $1,500 in 10 minutes. And we have other studies of members making $1,500 into $2,000 in 3 days. Every person's different. And I think that expecting what others are doing without knowing the work they're putting in is irrelevant. What's relevant is if you enjoy watches and cars, then learn the trade now. Get a taste of it. You don't have to play tomorrow morning, but learn how it works. One, you'll be a lot less impressed next time you see a Lamborghini because you'll learn how easy and affordable it is. And you might be like, I'm no longer following that guy because I'm not buying that crap anymore because I know exactly what it is. Right. And then two, a lot of times you'll start to realize when you see a guy with a Lamborghini and you start seeing another guy with a Volvo, they might have cost the same thing. On the surface, they don't look like the same cars, but they might be the exact same price. And you just don't realize that because you don't understand the market. Education and information opens your eyes to reality. And a reality and perspective that you didn't know expected. So when your perspective enhances, your view of the world changes. And the key here is to change your view of the world around all of these things. And that's it.
Wow. It sounds very simple, and I hope that a lot of people can grasp that.
Life is very, very simple.
Very true.
Very, very simple. I can't stress it enough.
Very true. So PJ, what courses do you have geared around trading watches?
So people, if they want to learn all about some of the things we discussed here, just follow the philosophy or read the books or anything else, you can go to learnfrompj.com and you can get there basically access to all of the different things I do. I teach a lot on philosophy, psychology, business, entrepreneurship. And then I also have a lot on watch trading and, cars. The watch trading site specifically is watchtradingacademy.com and the car site is exoticcarhacks.com. So those are just two opportunities to learn about all, or you can start educating yourself about becoming a better human by just reading some of my books on entrepreneurship and consciousness. And again, no matter what, one way or another, you're going to get through it. So you either get through it today or later when the world forces you to get through it. But at some point or another, you're going to realize that the world is ran on money. And the faster you learn to master it, the less you'll worry about it. And the more you can focus on things that matter to you. But trying to bypass it and not accept society for what it is can cost you a lot in the long term.
Very true. Very true. Now, if they need to find you aside from what you just stated, what social media platforms?
Oh, the best place to follow me personally is on Instagram at @ICreateMillionaires. Really simple. And if anything, you can just Google my name, and Facebook, I'm there. But I'm very active on Instagram personally. So.
Okay, great. Well, listen, PJ, really appreciate you coming on and speaking today. I hope that a lot of people take the information that you just gave and they apply it to joining your course, and not just in joining your course, but informing themselves. And
I hope people use this information to better their lives, regardless of what they choose to do with it. That's in their hands. It always has been and always will be.
Very true. Well, thank you once again. Also, tell Alyssa thank you very much as well. She's the one that set all this up.
You got it.
And we'll be talking, PJ. Thank you.
Got it, buddy. Talk soon, okay?
All right. Bye-bye.